In a moment that stunned America, Cardinal Timothy Dolan shared unexpected truths about the late Charlie Kirk, leaving viewers silent. On live television, his heartfelt words not only revealed a deeper side of Kirk, but also moved Vice President JD Vance to tears. The broadcast has since ignited national debate, emotion, and reflection. Many now ask, was this the most powerful TV moment of 2025? The morning show had been planned as routine. Fox and Friends had invited Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, for what producers assumed would be a short reflection on faith during uncertain times. But when the cameras turned on, his expression seemed different. He looked pale, yet deeply determined. His eyes carried grief and conviction. Then he spoke a name, Charlie Kirk. The studio fell silent. Across the country, viewers leaned closer to their screens. Kirk's assassination just 10 days earlier still weighed heavily on the nation. Families were replaying the haunting video from Utah Valley University, where a young activist had ended his life with a single gunshot. Cardinal Dolan's voice broke that silence. "I was caught off guard," he admitted. "That doesn't happen often. But when I heard the tragic news, I thought, I need to understand who this young man really was." The anchor swallowed hard as the camera zoomed in. Across America, living rooms grew still. No one expected what would come next. Leaning forward, Dolan's voice carried the weight of sleepless nights. "I spent the past week studying Charlie's life," he said carefully. "The more I learned, the more I realized this young man was a modern-day St. Paul." The words struck like thunder. Gasps echoed. Even the hosts froze, shuffling papers in disbelief. St. Paul, the fearless missionary of the early church, now compared to a 31-year-old conservative activist. Yet Dolan continued. Charlie was blunt and direct. He didn't avoid conflict, but he always showed respect. That's what stood out. Even when he debated opponents, there was something— Dolan paused, his voice shaking. There was something Christ-like in the way he refused to hate. Tears formed in the cardinal's eyes. Across the nation, homes erupted into whispers. Social media lit up instantly. Some praised his words as inspiring, others warned they went too far. But no one doubted the seriousness in his tone. Meanwhile, in Washington, one man sat frozen in front of the screen, Vice President JD Vance. His lips trembled. That morning, he had risen early, sipping coffee at the Naval Observatory, preparing for a day of meetings. But when an aide rushed in saying, "You need to see Fox News," his heart tightened. As he entered the study, Dolan's words filled the room. He was a missionary, an evangelist, a hero. Vance's hand gripped the armrest. His eyes burned. For him, Charlie Kirk was not just a name in headlines. He was a friend. A young man who had walked through Ohio towns alongside him, urging forgotten students to believe their voices mattered. A fiery debater, yes, but also someone who prayed with equal intensity. When Dolan called Kirk a modern St. Paul, Vance's chest heaved. Under his breath, he whispered, "Dear Lord." Staffers glanced at him but stayed silent. For the first time in months, America's vice president let tears run freely. He didn't wipe them. In that moment, he wasn't a political leader. He was a grieving friend, struck by truth on live television. Back in the Fox studio, the silence lingered. Producers, usually busy behind the cameras, stood frozen. Even the anchors, known for steady professionalism, stumbled over their words. Dolan sat back, hands folded, speaking without notes. "I've been a priest for decades," he said softly. "I've walked with saints and sinners, leaders and prisoners. And yet, what I learned about Charlie Kirk in just 1 week humbled me." The anchor tried to interject, but Dolan raised a gentle hand. "Let me finish." Across the nation, viewers gripped coffee mugs, parents called their children into the living room, and college students in dorms stopped to watch. This was no ordinary interview. The cardinal's voice cracked. Charlie Kirk's life, short as it was, reflected our nation. It revealed our divisions, but also our hope. It showed what courage looks like when someone stands alone. In the control room, a producer whispered, This is history." Then came the moment no one expected. Dolan leaned forward, eyes glistening. At first, I only knew what the headlines said: divisive, controversial, inflammatory. That's how he was portrayed. But when I looked deeper, I saw something else. The anchor asked quietly, "What do you mean, Your Eminence?" Dolan lowered his voice. "I discovered a young man who prayed before debates, who treated even his fiercest critics as human beings made in God's image. Yes," he spoke bluntly. "Yes, he fought hard. But he carried respect everywhere he went. He carried faith." Gasps rippled across the panel. Dolan's tone sharpened. "We were told he was a troublemaker. But I tell you, this was a missionary, an evangelist, a hero who lived what St. Paul said: the truth will set you free." America stopped. Phones buzzed. Online debates erupted. Catholics argued fiercely, some outraged, others moved to tears. And in Washington, JD Vance whispered, "Finally, someone sees Charlie for who he was." He stood frozen before the screen. His aides had stepped back, leaving him alone. He didn't want anyone to see his tears. He remembered the first time he met Charlie, years before becoming vice president. It was in a crowded Ohio gymnasium. Charlie had bounded onto the stage, Bible in hand, declaring, "Truth doesn't fear debate." The crowd roared. Now, hearing Dolan call him a modern St. Paul, Vance felt something break inside. This wasn't just validation, it was vindication. Charlie had been mocked and dismissed for years. Yet here was one of America's most respected Catholic voices, affirming what many quietly believed. "How blessed we were," Vance whispered, "to live at the same time as him." On live television, Dolan continued. For JD Vance, time seemed to stand still. His friend's legacy was being redeemed, and his own heart was shaken. Across the nation, something rare happened. Coffee shops, offices, and homes turned up their televisions. Phones buzzed with alerts. People who never watched morning shows found themselves glued to the broadcast. In a Kansas farmhouse, a mother of 3 wiped away tears as she packed lunches. In a Manhattan apartment, college students who once protested, Kirk sat quietly, rethinking. Online, the phrase "modern-day St. Paul" trended instantly. Supporters shared it as proof. Critics called it reckless, but no one ignored it. Inside the Fox studio, one anchor whispered off camera, "This isn't a segment anymore. This is a moment." Unaware of the storm outside, Dolan folded his hands. "I think we've underestimated what God can do through one life." For JD Vance, those words cut deeply. He whispered to himself, "Yes, yes, we did." The studio lights reflected in Dolan's glasses as his voice trembled. "I have seen powerful men, presidents, senators, business leaders. But in Charlie Kirk's story, I saw something rarer. A young man willing to be hated, willing to be mocked, yet never letting bitterness take root. That is Christ-like." The silence in the studio deepened. The anchor's eyes were red, lips pressed tight. America was watching one of its leading Catholic figures fight back tears on live television. He continued, "Last night, I visited the NYU Catholic Student Center. 200 young people gathered there. Do you know what they were talking about? Not gossip, not sports, not politics. They were talking about Charlie Kirk. They said, 'He made us brave.'" The words were almost unbearable. Viewers at home sobbed. Families clutched each other closer. And in Washington, JD Vance covered his mouth, whispering, "Charlie, they finally see you." Unable to sit any longer, Vance stood. His chest ached, his vision blurred. He paced the study, gripping rosary beads near the window. On the screen, Dolan's words replayed, "This young man is a modern St. Paul, a missionary, an evangelist, a hero." Vance broke down. His shoulders shook. He muttered through tears. He prayed before every fight. He loved this country more than himself. Why did they take him from us? He thought of their countless late-night talks, not just about politics, but about faith, family, and purpose. Charlie Kirk had been more than just an activist. To JD Vance, he had been a brother in spirit. And now, watching Cardinal Dolan publicly affirm what he had always believed, Vance felt something stirring inside. Yes, grief, but also resolve. In that moment, the vice president wasn't thinking of policy or speeches. His mind was fixed on one thing, telling the world who Charlie Kirk truly was. And he knew he wouldn't hold back. As Dolan's words replayed across the nation, the Catholic Church itself reacted with mixed feelings. In Boston, a young priest sat at his desk whispering, "St. Paul, he really said that?" In Chicago, an older bishop frowned, already bracing for criticism. But in New York, students who had heard Dolan the night before at the Catholic Center broke into tears. Texting friends, "The Cardinal sees Charlie as we do." When Fox cut to commercial, the floodgates had already opened. Clips of Dolan's remarks spread across TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Families who had never followed Charlie's work now watched his old speeches in a different light. For everyday Americans, Dolan's voice carried a weight no politician could match. His words, clear, simple, undeniable, pierced through years of cynicism. In Washington, Vice President Vance's phone buzzed nonstop. Senators, governors, pastors all sent the same message. "Did you hear what Dolan just said?" Vance closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and braced for what was coming. By midday, reporters had crowded outside the Naval Observatory. Cameras lined the gates, microphones pointed forward, waiting. Vance had stayed silent all morning, meeting only with his staff. But finally, he stepped out. His face was pale, his eyes swollen from tears, but his voice was steady. "I'm stunned," he began, humbled and grateful that Cardinal Dolan took time to truly look at Charlie's work instead of relying on the biased and frankly destructive reporting from much of the mainstream media. The press froze. Not a word, not a movement. Cardinal Dolan's comparison of Charlie to St. Paul reflects what many of us already knew but often could not say aloud. Charlie never quit. He fought for liberty with respect. And I've never seen anyone live out Jesus' teachings more faithfully than Charlie Kirk. How blessed we all were to live at the same time as him. For the first time that day, Vance smiled faintly. "Magnificent," he said. His words spread instantly across every network. Channels cut live to replay his statement in full. In living rooms across America, tears welled again. People who had once opposed Kirk admitted quietly, "Maybe we judged too quickly." Supporters clutched their chests in pride, whispering prayers. Online, backlash grew just as fierce. Critics accused Dolan and Vance of rewriting history. But for every angry post, there were 10 thanking them for telling Kirk's story with faith and compassion. At the White House, President Trump watched silently. Those near him noticed his eyes misty. In Salt Lake City, students lit candles outside the university, holding signs reading, "Truth will set you free." Back at the Naval Observatory, Vance stepped inside again, his heart still heavy but his spirit steadied. He knew this was only the beginning, because now, Charlie Kirk's story had been seen in a new way and no one would forget it. Within hours, America was split. Cable news replayed the clips endlessly. On CNN, a panelist shook his head. "Reckless. Comparing a political activist to St. Paul." Meanwhile, a Fox anchor choked up on air. "I never saw this coming." On social media, hashtags like Charlie Kirk Legacy and St. Paul Comparison trended worldwide. Supporters posted clips of Kirk praying with students before debates. Critics resurfaced his most controversial statements. But beyond the noise, something deeper was happening. Families around dinner tables spoke about faith and sacrifice. College students debated whether they had misunderstood him. Priests rewrote homilies overnight. Some congregations moved to tears. In Washington, Vance sat quietly at his desk watching the storm unfold. He knew Charlie had always faced controversy head-on. Now it was his turn to carry that same burden, with grace and respect. Bowing his head, he prayed, "Lord, give me strength to honor him, not with anger, but with love." A memory came back to him. 2019, after an event. Charlie had leaned in and said, "Jay, truth is always worth fighting for, but if you speak it with respect, you'll change hearts, not just win arguments." That line now echoed like prophecy. JD Vance wiped his eyes, stood tall, and prepared to speak again. He knew the critics would attack. He knew the media storm was only beginning, but he also knew Charlie's story was greater than politics. By evening, the entire country seemed to hold its breath. From New York to Los Angeles, televisions glowed as Dolan's interview replayed. Clips of Vance's emotional response spread everywhere. In small towns, prayer groups gathered, lighting candles for Charlie. In Utah, students filled campus steps with flowers and handwritten notes. "You made us brave. The truth will set you free." Even critics admitted the raw humanity of the moment. One columnist wrote, "Agree with him or not, JD Vance's tears reminded us that behind politics are people, friends, grieving friends." Inside the Naval Observatory, aides told Vance his words had sparked record-breaking viewership. "Sir, the country is watching you," one whispered. Vance nodded, but he wasn't thinking of polls or ratings, only of Charlie and the responsibility of carrying his legacy with dignity. By the next morning, newsrooms were in chaos. MSNBC ran banners questioning Dolan's judgment, Cardinal Sparks' outrage. CNN debates raged over whether comparing Kirk to St. Paul was insight or revisionism. Fox replayed Dolan's full remarks every hour, branding it the broadcast that stopped America. In parish halls, priests clashed, some praising Dolan's courage, others fearing backlash. The Catholic divide was now on full display, but ordinary Americans weren't focused on that. They remembered the Cardinal's trembling voice, his tears, and Vance's raw emotion. On Twitter, a clip of Vance whispering, "How blessed we were to live at the same time as him," passed 20 million views. It was no longer just about politics, it was about humanity. Still, White House aides warned Vance that every word going forward would be scrutinized. "Sir," one told him quietly, "this isn't just news anymore. This is history." That night, Vance slipped away from the observatory with only a small Secret Service detail. He asked to be taken to the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. Inside, the church was empty, the high ceiling echoing with silence. He knelt at the altar, rosary in hand. The flickering candles reminded him of the Utah vigil. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Charlie, you fought harder than most ever could, and you never lost your faith. Help me honor you the way you deserve." A priest entered quietly, lit a candle, and left without a word. For Vance, the silence was enough. In that moment, Washington politics faded. All that remained was grief, faith, and the burden of friendship. When he rose, wiping his eyes, he knew his next step. America needed to hear not only Dolan's words, but his. The next morning, despite aides urging him to rest, Vance insisted. His phone buzzed with requests for interviews and statements. "Set it up," he said firmly. "If the nation is speaking about Charlie, then let me tell them who he really was." That afternoon, JD Vance stepped before the press again, this time calmer, more composed. Cameras flashed. He began. Cardinal Dolan saw what many missed. Charlie Kirk wasn't perfect, none of us are. But he was a missionary for truth. A man who never hid his faith, who prayed before he spoke, who respected even those who opposed him. His voice steadied, echoing the same conviction Cardinal Dolan had carried. Charlie's hero was Christ, and if you wonder why he faced so much hatred, just look at the cross. Truth always attracts enemies. Some reporters wiped their eyes in silence. Others scribbled furiously in their notebooks. The room froze, and across America, families leaned closer to their television screens. They began to realize this wasn't just about one man's death. It was about faith, about courage, about the cost of speaking truth with love. From Ohio to Texas, the reaction was the same. A mother who had once warned her son never to attend a Charlie Kirk event now wept quietly. "Maybe I was wrong about him," she whispered. Veterans in a Texas bar raised their glasses in silence as Fox replayed Vance's trembling words. How blessed were we? Even in liberal cities, something rare was happening. In college dorms, students who had once argued bitterly against Charlie sat in uneasy silence, watching Dolan's words with an unexpected respect. For the first time, the politics didn't matter. What gripped them was the raw humanity of it all. an archbishop breaking down on live television, and the Vice President of the United States crying openly for a friend. In Salt Lake City, where tragedy had struck, students stood shoulder to shoulder at Utah Valley University. Candles lit the night sky, glowing with sorrow and defiance. One young woman whispered into a local news camera, "He wasn't perfect, but he was brave. And that's why we're here." The grief had moved beyond politics. It was now personal. Still, backlash roared. On MSNBC, a commentator scoffed, "To call Charlie Kirk a modern-day St. Paul is offensive to Christians everywhere." On Twitter, activists dug up his most controversial speeches, accusing Dolan and Vance of rewriting history. But the tide had shifted. Dolan's reputation gave weight to words that could not be dismissed. Even critics admitted he spoke from the heart, not from politics. Inside the White House, aides debated whether Vance had gone too far. President Trump cut through the noise. "Leave him alone," he told them. "He's doing what's right." For JD Vance, the noise was deafening. But when an aide showed him footage of Utah students holding candles, his eyes softened. He whispered, "Charlie would have smiled at that. He always said the truth shines brightest in the dark." And with that, Vance knew. His voice could not fall silent. By now, the country was waiting for his next move. Countdown clocks ticked on cable news. Newspapers splashed front-page headlines. "Vance breaks down over Kirk." Radio stations replayed Dolan's trembling words, asking listeners whether they agreed. Priests lit candles during Mass. Teachers debated whether Dolan's words might change how young people viewed faith in public life. And everywhere, ordinary Americans asked the same haunting question. Was this the most powerful television moment of 2025? At the Naval Observatory, JD Vance sat with his wife and children, watching the coverage. His young son tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, why are people crying?" Vance pulled him close. "Because someone brave told the truth. And the truth can make people cry, son, even strong people." The boy nodded quietly. Vance kissed his forehead. Outside, cameras waited. The nation knew his next words would not just be a political statement. They would shape the legacy of his fallen friend. By nightfall, America seemed to pause in unison. In Utah, thousands gathered at a vigil, holding posters with Charlie's words. "Truth doesn't fear debate. The truth will set you free." The candles flickered in the night, painting sorrow into hope. In New York, Catholics filled St. Patrick's Cathedral. Some knelt in silence, others wept aloud. A woman clutched her rosary and whispered, "He was young, but he touched the world." Even in Washington, traffic slowed as people gathered on the National Mall, praying and singing hymns. Reporters described it simply, a nation stopping to grieve. Yet on television, critics shouted louder, blasting Dolan's comparison. But outside the pundit bubble, Americans weren't debating. They were crying. In his office, JD Vance watched the footage, the screen's glow reflecting in his eyes. His lips trembled as he saw students bow their heads in prayer. He whispered, "Charlie, they see you now. They really see you." The next morning, Vance sat for a live Fox interview. He didn't look polished. He didn't look rehearsed. He looked human. His voice cracked from the start. "I've cried more in the last 24 hours than I have in years. Cardinal Dolan's words shook me because for once someone powerful told the truth about Charlie." The interviewer stayed silent. Vance continued, his hands trembling. He wasn't perfect. He was blunt. He was fierce. But he respected people and he prayed before he fought. Do you know how rare that is in politics? I was blessed to call him a friend. And I'll say this. I have never seen anyone follow Jesus' teachings more closely than Charlie Kirk. The clip exploded across the internet. The vice president in tears. That caption appeared millions of times. For many, this was no longer politics. It was grief. Raw, unfiltered, undeniable. The divide sharpened. Critics doubled down. Supporters rallied harder. But in the middle, ordinary Americans shared their stories. A farmer in Iowa uploaded a tearful video. "I met Charlie once. He told my daughter never to be afraid of her faith. Today, I believe that more than ever. A Florida sophomore admitted online, I once protested him. But after last night, I can't stop crying. Maybe I didn't listen enough. Online, the battle raged. Offline, something deeper stirred. Churches overflowed. Vigils multiplied. Conversations about faith spread through kitchens, classrooms, and workplaces. In Washington, letters poured into the vice president's office. One from a 12-year-old boy read, Mr. Vice President, I want to be brave like Charlie. Thank you for telling us the truth. Vance pressed the letter to his chest. For the first time since Charlie's death, he felt a measure of peace. That night, long after staff had gone home and his family had fallen asleep, Vance sat alone in his study. The television hummed softly, replaying Dolan's trembling words. A stack of letters lay on his desk. One envelope, scrawled in a child's handwriting, caught his eye. He opened it slowly. Dear Mr. Vice President, my dad says Charlie Kirk was brave. I never met him, but I want to be brave too. Please tell the world not to forget him. Love, Hannah. Age 9! Vance held the letter against his chest as his shoulders shook with grief. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered into the silence. They won't forget, Hannah. I promise you. The cameras weren't rolling. No journalists stood nearby. Yet in that quiet moment, JD Vance carried the weight of a promise, not only to one young girl, but to an entire country. He knew that tomorrow he would have to speak again. This time, not as vice president, not as a politician, but as a man honoring his friend. Early the next morning, aides rushed into the Naval Observatory with urgent updates. Vigils were multiplying across cities. Churches were overflowing. People were calling on JD Vance to address the nation. He nodded calmly. Prepare a podium, he instructed. But no politics, no speeches, just truth. As staff drafted remarks, Vance shook his head. Not this. It's not about sound bites. It's about Charlie. He set the papers aside and opened his Bible instead. Later, while practicing in front of the mirror, his wife Usha quietly entered and placed a hand on his shoulder. Speak from here, she said, touching his chest. That's what Charlie would have wanted. Vance nodded gently. He followed Christ more closely than anyone I've ever known. Meanwhile, Secret Service prepared the grounds as reporters gathered outside. Across the country, networks announced, Vice President Vance will deliver a tribute tonight. Many sensed it would be an unforgettable moment. As the sun set over Washington, the vice president stepped to the podium outside his residence. The American flag waved softly behind him. Candles flickered in the crowd. Millions tuned in. Families huddled in their living rooms. Students streamed it on their phones. Churches projected it on their walls. Vance began slowly, his voice weighed down by emotion. I've struggled with what to say. No words feel strong enough for a man like Charlie. He paused, holding back tears. Cardinal Dolan called him a modern-day St. Paul, and I believe that with all my heart. Charlie lived the words of Jesus. The truth will set you free. His voice grew firmer. Charlie Kirk was more than a political figure. He was a messenger of truth. He prayed before he debated. He respected those who despised him, and he never wavered in faith. The crowd fell silent. Some cried openly. Gripping the podium, Vance whispered into the microphone. We were blessed to live at the same time as him, and I promise you, his light will not be extinguished. Reporters, normally scribbling notes, wiped away tears. Even veteran anchors on live television struggled to stay composed. Vance paused, trembling. He looked down, took a deep breath, and whispered, I promised I wouldn't break down tonight, but I can't. His voice cracked, his eyes wet. He pulled a photograph from his pocket. Charlie Kirk with young Turning Point volunteers, hands raised in prayer. Holding it up, he said, This is who he was. Not the caricature, not the headlines. A young man on fire for God, for liberty, and for truth. Gasps filled the air. Across the nation, many held their hearts. Online, the phrase spread instantly. Not the caricature, the man. For the first time in years, politics faded. Humanity came through. Through tears, Vance gave America a picture of Charlie that no critic could erase. As the tribute reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The crowd outside began singing softly. It wasn't planned or rehearsed, but voices rose together with the hymn, Amazing Grace. Vance bowed his head, hand pressed over his heart, lips moving with the words. Across America, others joined in. In New Jersey, a widow sang, holding her late husband's Bible. In Texas, a family of 5 held hands. On a California campus, students sang through tears. News outlets, often quick to cut away, stayed with the moment, broadcasting every verse. When the hymn ended, Vance lifted his head. Charlie's light does not end here. It shines in each of you who choose truth, faith, and courage. His voice steadied. And I promise, as long as I have breath, I will carry his mission forward. Not as a politician, but as his friend. The crowd erupted in sobs and applause. For one brief moment, America stood united in grief and reverence. The camera zoomed in as Vance prepared to close. His face streaked with tears, his voice raw but resolute. Charlie Kirk showed us what one life fully given to God can do. And if we are wise, we will not only mourn him, we will live like him. He scanned the crowd, then looked straight into the camera. Do not let this moment pass. Do not let his sacrifice fade. Carry it with you. Let his truth set you free. From churches to dorm rooms, farms to city apartments, millions sat stunned, whispering, Amen. Then, in a softer voice, Vance offered his final words. Rest in peace, Charlie. We will never forget you. As the broadcast ended, Americans knew they had witnessed something lasting, beyond politics, beyond time. If this tribute touched your heart, don't just watch, be part of it. Subscribe to join a community that values truth, faith, and courage. Like this video to honor Charlie's memory. Share your prayers in the comments so his legacy lives on in every word. And for those who want to go deeper, join our membership to unlock special features and help carry this mission forward. Together we keep the light alive.